Let's talk about mythology. So this is another video on my continued exploration of this national treasure hunt that's going on based upon this book, There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black. And I want to point out something to you in the book that I think you might find interesting. I'm sure those who are part of this treasure hunt, they've identified this and analyzed it 100 different ways, perhaps. And it's fascinating to see how people try to sort of impress a lot of meaning onto the story, where what I'm trying to do is extract the meaning that I think was likely intended, and then trying to connect it to sort of the psychological profile of the author. But also, I'm just intrigued by the game design principles and how that could have implications for learning and life and education and other things like that. So here's what I want to talk about today. In the book, there's a reference, and this is true in treasure hunting all over the places. X marks the spot. Well, there's clearly an X in the book, or should I say, on the book. So if you look at the front cover, you see this, and there's this little piece of paper here, and if I take this off, there is an actual X. So the question is, what's in the X? And if you look right in the middle, that is actually a famous painting, the Apotheosis of Hercules, which I will talk about a little bit later. And this same painting shows up in chapter 21 of the book as well. And it's under the title of Antiquities of Alexander, and the subtitle is Make It Make Sense, which could be read as suggesting that there's something that kind of ties things together in that chapter, not some kind of master cryptograph that sort of gives you the answer to all of the puzzles, but helps you understand more of the game and how it's designed. And I would contend that I think it's pretty clear that this game is designed around mythologies and the notion of myths. If you read that particular chapter, chapter 21, he goes into, chapter 21 is, he talks about Alexander the Great, and then he talks about sort of particular treasure. And that painting is right there, the Apotheosis of Hercules, which is by, I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's Francois Lemonnier, I believe, Lemonnier, perhaps. Sorry, I apologize for butchering that. But it was completed in the 18th century, and it's located at the Palace of Versailles in France. And the apotheosis, if you don't know you're a Greek, this is the welcoming of Hercules into Olympus, Mount Olympus by the gods, after the completion of Hercules' labors. So that's the depiction, and that's the centerpiece. If you look more closely at that particular painting, you see that Zeus is sort of the centerpiece, and then there's a couple of other gods that are surrounding, and you'll see down further in the image, there's Hercules who's sort of going up into Olympus. Now, if you look into that particular chapter, though, the author, Jon Collins-Black, talks about these different mythologies, but he says something in there that he clearly wants the reader to pay attention to, which is that to solve these treasures, you need to look beyond the ancient mythologies to those of our own day. Now, what's interesting, though, is in that chapter, what he explains that he's meaning by that. So he makes that statement. And when he goes on to the mythologies, he talks about the myths. And by myths, he seems to be using myth in some ways in that chapter as a synonym for kind of the false views or the errors or the mistakes of our age. Things like racism and injustices and other things like that in society. That's what he seems to be pointing to in that particular chapter. And yet, if you look at the breadth of his entire book, and you look at chapters 1 through 23, every single chapter ties you to some kind of mythology. And so let me just walk you through. I have it in front of me. So chapter 1 is the 120 karat sapphire chapter. And his main characters that he focuses on telling their story. It's a modern American mythology. Some mythologies are rooted in truth, some not. But it's the modern mythology of the great American company. It's Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple and designer of the Apple computers. He does reference Steve Jobs, but he focuses on Steve Wozniak, the kind of lesser known name in some ways. I mean, he's known for those of us that study entrepreneurship in the computer industry, and we know it, and those in the IT industry know Steve Wozniak very well, but he didn't reach quite that level of kind of iconic fame of Steve Jobs in some people's minds. But Steve Wozniak, clearly an impressive entrepreneur and designer and innovator. And then he talks about Mike Scott, Apple's first CEO, known for leading the early Macintosh team. So those are his two mythological characters in chapter 1. You go to chapter 2, there's Tuyet. Again, I'm going to butcher the names. I'm so sorry. But it's Tuyet Nguyet, Nguyet, who's a Vietnamese editor and founder of Arts of Asia. He's it's a leading art publication, very involved in art treasure, literally treasure hunting, right? And so this is the mythology of the treasure hunter, and the character, the main character and mythological character is a more contemporary mythological character. And then in chapter 3, he talks about two particular characters, Seth Gould, who is actually the metalsmith who created the 5 boxes for the treasure hunt. And then there's Michael Perkin, again, mispronouncing the names, who's a Russian master craftsman who designed many of the famed Fabergé eggs and some other kinds of jewelry as well. So we have kind of these designers that are represented, these mythological designers, but contemporary figures and characters. In chapter 4, we have the 96-carat emerald, and it's Rob Levinsky, who's a mineral dealer and founder of a gallery of fine arts, a scholar in this area, has done some great work. And so here again, he's giving us a modern mythology. He's telling us the story of this person. And then we get into chapter 5, and he tells the story of the masterworks of Art Smith, an African-American modernist jeweler known for these really bold, expressive forms of metalwork. Chapter 6, Rubies to Wear, he brings up Angie Murray and Lauren Harwell Godfrey, some modern jewelers who kind of combine sort of colors and geometry and ancient iconography and some spirituality and other things like that. In chapter 7, then the mythological character that he focuses upon is Amelia Earhart and her accomplishments, this aviation pioneer, obviously. And the first woman to kind of step into that space. The first notable woman. Chapter 8, beauty, we have Charles Laloma, a Hopi artist and jeweler, who was inspired by his Hopi tradition, but also created a kind of art that was that went sort of beyond the traditions of his own people, and yet sort of stayed true to them at the same time. And then in chapter 9, we have an interesting one because there's not a specific name or character listed, but there are the Chavin priests, these religious leaders who create the ancient civilization in Peru, known for this temple ceremonial-based culture and creating this kind of puzzle, and it's hard to sort of find your way in and the themes that were created. And then he tells a personal narrative and a personal story, and he has a theme around cognitive bias on this one. In chapter 10, he talks about Jackie Onassis as sort of the key mythical character, the former First Lady, book editor, known for her cultural legacy and her grace and her style and lots of other things as well. And then chapter 11, we have a focus upon a shipwrecked treasure and Captain Felicia de Fonseca. Again, I am so sorry for misrepresenting the pronunciations of all of these, but a ship captain involved in a famous treasure shipwreck legend. And again, so then we have another mythology there. Then in chapter 12, we get to the gold rush, and we have Sam Brennan, which I have a separate video on because I believe that the shovel and the pick that's represented in the front and back and in the book is tied to Sam Brennan, is one of my suspicions here. But then we also have a little minor reference to I think the 11th president, maybe, James Polk, and his tie to the gold rush. But it's all tied around the gold rush. And Sam Brennan, who is the entrepreneur who publicized the gold rush, and he made money selling the tools that were needed for those who were going after the gold rush. And then in chapter 13, we have Michael Jordan, who's highlighted. Obviously a modern mythological character in a big way. Chapter 14, we have the transcendentalist sort of mythological character of Henry David Thoreau, who's highlighted, and yet he sort of goes back and shows some of Thoreau's failures and mistakes and how he learned from those. And Lewis Comfort Tiffany also represented here. Obviously, Tiffany's, you're familiar with that name and that brand, the American artist and the designer. Okay, I'm going to go through this really quickly, but then chapter 15, we have Wilma Rudolph, the Olympic sprinter who overcame polio to become the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in an Olympics. That was in 1960 in the Rome Olympics. And then in chapter 16, we have the Atlanta Olympic medal, the Nigerian soccer team, the mythology around that, and then the coach is given a little bit of a highlight as well. Then chapter 17, we have the mythology, this American mythology around George Washington. And then chapter 18, the mythology of Andrew Carnegie. And chapter 19, we have the moon rocks. So we have the highlight of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and then even a little call out to Captain Picard, the go boldly where no man has gone before, and the Star Trek mythology. And then in chapter 20, we have Campbell Bridges highlighted around the Scottish gymnologist who discovered a specific garnet in East Africa, and Mark Orosa, a jeweler. And then in chapter 21, we have Alexander the Great, but then we also have the introduction to some different gods and demigods that are referenced in that chapter. Then we go to chapter 22, we have Picasso as the mythological character, and then Alan Anawadi in chapter 23. That's sort of sing your own special song component here. So my point is this: the entire book is designed around a collection of mythological tales, tales grounded in history, some not grounded in history, but the entire book is there and is built around mythology. And I would contend that as a design, this is a really fascinating design principle for a designer. So he is layering story upon story upon story. Each story offers a new lesson, not unlike in Aesop's Fables or something like that, but true to the spirit of traditional mythology in most cultures as well, that there is some kind of lesson or something that they would like you to take a look at, to observe, to consider, to think about. And it's a really fascinating way to design a kind of journey for someone, whether you're designing an alternate reality game, a treasure hunt, or something like that. He's woven together these disparate mythologies with kind of common universal lessons and principles. I would say that for those who are actually part of the treasure hunt and they want to use this in some kind of practical way, I would say that this is a key to understanding the clues, because not all the rules of the game are explicitly stated. He doesn't tell you what a clue is and what a clue isn't. He doesn't sort of state out, hey, this is the clue, this is not a clue, this is just a story for your interest. So I would say that these mythologies, those are the containers of the clues. And if you follow them along and you look for some patterns and some trends, you'll see that they layer together to tell a larger story. And that larger story is what kind of gives you some hints to where you might find the largest treasure box, which is the first 23 chapters are largely focused on that. So I thought I'd just offer that as something for you to consider, this mythological layering. That is as I've said before, Jon Collins-Black, his psychological profile, he is mythological more than mathematical. And so I don't think that he's creating a bunch of cryptographs and little puzzles and small clues hidden in images and other things like that are the key. There may be some things like that in there for fun and interest, but that the core of the clues are found in the narratives of these mythologies that are told very consistently throughout. And then he weaves in some of his own little personal mythologies and stories along the way. Hope you found this interesting. I'll continue to do some of these kind of explorations of an ethnographic researcher on the nature of this this treasure hunt as a participant observer, one who's participating in it a little bit, just as a fun avocation, clearly not at the centerpiece of what I do, for those of you who know my day job and what I do. So there you go.